I want to talk about maybe one big outgoing that could be happening, because I've heard this name over and over again linked away for months now, always to Italy. Like all the reports constantly say Italy, and this guy is Hakim Ziyech. Now, people can probably find it. I could even link it in the cards. Last summer, this was one of the most exciting players, especially for you. I remember on the channel we made a video specifically about Hakim Ziyech, speaking about how much you rated the guy, how much you felt he was going to be massive for Lampard. I think we made a video following like the Sheffield United performance, which was probably his best performance at Chelsea so far when you look back at it, which was so long ago now. But he hasn't got the run in the team that I think many people would have wanted him to. There's been many reasons for that as I've delved into the channel, as I'm sure you have delved into. What's your, just before we get into his future, what is your analysis of Ziyech's first season at Stamford Bridge?
If I was to give it a score, maybe 6.5 out of 10 is the score I'm looking at. I just think it's been a season of many difficulties. I feel like I'm like a broken record at this point, but obviously when he left Ajax, their season got, cancelled prematurely due to COVID. Maybe it was the wrong decision to make, essentially meaning that he didn't play any football from I think January or February until obviously he signed for us. And, there's only so much fitness you can do by yourself. It's not the same when you're not within a club setup, working with trainers, with the proper equipment, etc., to be, fully match fit to play like Premier League games. So, he was always, he was always going to have it tough in that sense. And for the fact that he gets an injury then in the preseason game against Brighton, then of course, you're hoping that he starts the season. I think that him being involved quite early has a very positive impact in the team, because when he does come back fit, we see what Lampard's plan was for him. We see how he was looking to find Werner over the top. His creativity was very handy and useful. And I think one thing too that was always a low-key thing that wasn't really spoken about enough was just that great link-up play between him and Kai. There was a lot of fears between whether they could play together, as they like to operate in the same area of the field. However, it was like Kai, this is the player Kai wanted to play alongside, with nice one-touch passes, give and goes, constant movement and rotation. They both took it in turns when to move in field and move out right. And for me, I think that really shows a high footballing IQ and, just how, just the potential of that system. And we saw the culmination of that against, teams like Leeds, for example, or Burnley. I think Burnley would be like one of the best footballing performances this year. And then literally to get injuries to him and then the others on top of that, it ruins things. And when Ziyech comes back, we have a manager now that's now taken out an attacking player to bring back a defender for very understandable, logical reasons, which is very fair. And then Ziyech finds actually, tactically, there's no real place for him now, because when he likes to receive out wides, he can't do that because the wing backs are there. And it seemed like Tuchel didn't really have a set plan for him, because there'd be times where Ziyech was the false nine. There'd be times where Ziyech was the one who was having to make the runs into the box. There'll be times where, it's like it was like Tuchel wanted him to play the Mount role when he was going to drop deep to form a three, which, I'm sure with more time and if he was fully fit, he would have done better. But that's still not the very best way to get the best out of him. He's not that type of player. So, for me, there's so many hypotheticals from this. One, is Tuchel going to have maybe an alternative system, which maybe I think we need, where it does incorporate a lot of these guys to get the best out of them? And if not, then maybe I think Ziyech will decide if he wants to go or not. I don't think it'll be a decision where the club are like, you can go. I think it will come down to Ziyech, and maybe the club discussing it that, we want to let him go for PR reasons, whatever. But I don't know. It's quite disappointing, because I definitely feel like, there should be a place for him in the team due to what he can bring. Because I've really seen this guy play a lot of football, and I know a lot of people introduced him during that amazing Champions League run that Ajax had. But this guy really is a top pro, and the credit that he's and the praise he's got back in his hometown from legends like your Huddits and Van Bastens, Van Persie's, etc. They all say the same thing, that he's not being played in his best position. So we'll find out. I think if Ziyech does leave, that will really tell us what to expect from next season tactically. But I think it would be a real shame, because we never would have seen the very best of him. And I think that's what I can really say to that.
I think that the surprising thing to me, I did a video on Ziyech, and I got some people to comment on Twitter, and of course, it was quite conflicted on Twitter. Some people, and I noticed in my comments, some people really big up Ziyech. They really think he should be playing like every single game. He should be like one of our biggest players. I can't say I'm fully into that personally, because I think there are players, and this isn't Ziyech's fault, as you've just demonstrated. Fitness, injuries. He's had a couple of injuries this year. The amount of attackers Chelsea have, this is the problem for a lot of players. I think we could have a similar conversation in a sense about Christian Pulisic. He could be a massive player for us, but is he going to get the time to do it? I do agree with you that I'm not quite sure if this system fully suits what he could do, like he was under Lampard, because it felt very much like Lampard was saying, you're the creative hub of Chelsea, you're going to be the guy that we're going to filter the ball through, and whether that was trying to get the ball out wide to Reece James, try and get those overlaps, try and make the pitch as wide as possible. One thing that did surprise me, because a lot of people say, Tuchel doesn't rate Ziyech, is that in Tuchel's time, he's given the same amount of starts to Ziyech. I think his starts, or at least appearances, as Frank Lampard did in the first part of the season. Which surprised me. My perception was that it would have been more for Lampard than for Tuchel, but that's what I discovered at the time. And it's not like Ziyech hasn't had any good performances for Tuchel. I think about the Champions League second leg against Atletico Madrid. I think about the Man City, or both, the first two Man City games, the semi-final, and also the Premier League game where he scored in both games. So I'm curious about Ziyech, and you brought up where the system, an alternative system that could suit Ziyech a lot more. We did see that briefly against Fulham, wasn't it? Where Tuchel changed up the system. He played Billy Gilmour as a lone DM basically, and played two. Ziyech and Mount were basically number 8s, weren't they, in front of them? Yeah. Would you like to see that next season? Because that, for me, very much felt more in the position Ziyech was getting in that game felt very much more in keeping with what he was doing under Lampard.
Yeah, I think, for sure, that can definitely be an alternative way to use him. But at the same time, we have players that can play in the back four, this 4-3-3. Tuchel's used that many a time himself. And, I think we've seen that we can play against the big teams, but you could beat every big team every season. That doesn't guarantee you winning any Premier League title in the end. It's the rest of the teams that we've struggled against and, kind of underperformed in certain areas. And for me, I think it comes down to that, lack of creativity, because they're more than happy to play without the ball, which we see all the time. So for me, you need to have a plan B. And, I was frustrated last season because even though I understand Tuchel's decisions, and of course they're correct, I just still felt like there were still opportunities where maybe more urgency could have been shown in games like that, where, if I'm seeing us struggle for 80 minutes, 90 minutes with the three at the back, why is there no sub-mates in like the 60th minutes change the formation to make things different, bring some new agency to the game. I felt like there were many opportunities for that in certain games, like against your your West Broms or your your Wolves, your Southampton, so many of them. And let's hope that next season we see something different. But even to touch upon it, I understand the maybe some people have criticism against Ziyech for some of the performances, but I think this is what it always comes down to in football. Like a few months back at the start of the season, we were criticizing Cover and Jorginho because, of course, when we were playing an expansive football, it didn't suit them. And, I guess, credit, you can criticize them, even though it's not super fair, because I still believe that when you sign players, especially in modern day football with how specialized everything is, you got to sign them knowing that, okay, this is how I'm going to use them for the next how many years, you know what I mean? And I feel like at times we can fall into that trap of being in situations where we have squads full of players where not everyone's fully meant to play that one style of football. So, my perspective definitely changed the second half of the season, seeing Jorginho and Kova really perform a lot more, naturally playing in a system which suits them, passing on the ground, lots of, tempo control and, very compact, so they don't have to necessarily cover big distances. But for other players, it would have suited them. And I think that's what it comes down to. So I've definitely learned personally not to be too harsh with players. I think when we understand what their game is, and let's say certain times they can't play it just because, managers, like Tuchel, for example, we had a job to do and it means making tough decisions. I try not to make it too personal, and I try to not make my critique too harsh, because it's kind of like, well, there's only so much you can do. You know what I mean?
You know, there's very few like world class players that you'd say you can throw into any system and they're going to improve it. There is a sense that I think what Tuchel's done so brilliantly with this team is, especially in the midfield area, which you bring up, is look at a situation that wasn't really perfect, that, you know, still probably needs more investment, but he's made the best out of that situation and got some incredible performances out of it. So you can't knock that, and those players deserve a lot of credit for that. This is a tough question, but I think it needs to be asked in terms of Callum Hudson-Odoi, because I look at Ziyech, I look at Hudson-Odoi, I look at Pulisic. I think those are three players for me with question marks over their future in terms of who's going to make it. Out of those three, who would you say, rather than who's most likely to make it at Chelsea, who do you think is most likely to be sold?
That's a hard one. That is a hard one. I mean, ideally, I'd be more than happy to keep all of them, to be honest, especially after a Champions League winning season. But on the question, I'm stuck maybe between Hudson-Odoi or Z. I think with Hudson, it could depend on, let's say, Bayern Munich coming with an offer saying, you know, here's the left-hand side for you. You know, you've seen how Musiala has been able to become a German international player now. It would never have happened if he remained at the club and didn't take her offer. You've 2 years on, you haven't secured that role, and you've been used as a wing back too, with the manager saying things such as, you know, you could improve aerially, which is just like it's not something you want to hear if you're a winger that plays on the left hand side. So I don't know. These are all just like hypotheticals. I'm going to wait until pre-season to see what's done and, you know, what the plan's going to be. But I don't know. Maybe between. I'd probably have to say Z, just based on the fact that there's a real possibility that maybe three at the back might be a bit more predominantly used than what I first thought.